All right. What's up, everybody? Today we have another video, and the video is, I would say, to me and my sister, it's quite important. And I think not, especially growing up in like an Asian household, it is a lot harder to do this. And this is setting boundaries, right? Setting boundaries such as not doing something that you don't want to do, actually saying no, and just not getting peer pressure, and actually listening to yourself, listening to your body, right? If you don't want to do something, listening to your mind. If you don't feel good about something, then you speak it. You say something about it, right? So I think one question I want to ask you, right? Since I think we dealt with a lot of these, and as we grew older, we were more aware of why we did some of the things that we do, which was because of how we were brought up. But how is something, can you explain your situation? Can you explain your situation with setting boundaries? Why has it been somewhat hard for you, and what are some ways that you've dealt with it?
Yeah. And as my brother brought up, like, part of the reason why I think it's so difficult to set boundaries at times is that I think that we're just always told that we have to say yes, like all the time. So, like, especially if there's like this, like, just like people pleasing nature that folks have, whether that be because of trauma or just like self protection, all of that stuff. It's hard to say no, and a lot of times, for me at least, like I tend to do a lot of things just because I feel like I have to, but that's not necessarily true, right? Like, I think it also depends on like where you are. Like, no matter if you're in a workplace or in a personal setting, like, you are not always required to say yes, and that is part of like prioritizing yourself and knowing that when you prioritize what you do, you can do more of the things that you want to do and spend time with the people that you want to spend time with. So I think that's like the big important realization that I made of like, this is why I have to set boundaries. And then it was deciding, okay, then what steps do I need to take?
Yeah.
So for me, I think like, I don't know, with my experience, like just at home, I feel like there's a different like culture, like difference just from like being in America and in the US, and also like our parents being like from like China, right?
Yeah.
There's so many different like nuances of just like what privacy means, and privacy is also included in the boundaries, right? Because I'll be doing something, right. And then there'll be people like telling me like, oh, stop while you're doing, and go do it, and then it kind of like translated in me, okay, I need to stop and drop everything that I'm doing to like help people, or like whatever they need at that moment. Like, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. And a lot of times, like, in elementary school, I've realized that I'm like, oh, right, I'm like so behind on everything. But like whenever there's something, I'm like, I gotta go like help them, when it's like they probably don't need my help, you know, and they can figure it out themselves. I need to take care of myself first and finish the homework assignments that I have, or you know, just like figure out like what I need to do. Yeah, so those are some of my situations that I had gone through just when I was younger, and it wasn't until maybe like college freshman year that I was like, oh wow, like I can't do everything.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do everything, and I have control over what I want to do. So I think at that point, it was just like that awareness that you were talking about. So number one thing, I think for me, was being aware of like what I didn't want to do, or where my energy could be conserved.
Yeah.
Because I think the big thing that like people have to realize, and maybe it's not like the best thing, that it doesn't like make you feel good, but it's like people don't really need you. Like, they will be able to find someone else, because we're not supposed to be codependent on people. Like, it's not supposed to be like you always rely on this person and they'll always have to like go to you when there's a crisis or something. Like, it's not true. Like, you are your own person, they're their own person, and if it's something serious, like, they will always be able to find someone else, or you can point them to the right resources. So I think for me, it was letting go of the fact that like I won't be able to help everyone.
Yeah.
Like, I can't be there all the time, and I have limited energy source. Like, I'm just one person too. So realizing that, and realizing that I won't be there for everyone, but I can try to be when I can. Because like when I'm rested, I'm more well aware and more present in the relationships and the conversations that I'm having.
Yeah.
Right? So recognizing the boundaries that I had, like recognizing the energy that I had, that I need for myself, and then going from there and dividing up the tasks of like, I can do this. I have the time to do that. I'll do it. You're important to me. I'll do it. And maybe some other people are like, we're acquaintances. I know you have other friends. I know you have people that you can rely on. Then like, I won't be as involved, but we can still like hang out and talk, and that's totally fine. So that awareness was so important to me first, before like figuring out like what boundaries I needed to set. Yeah. What about you? Like, what were some of the instances that like made you realize like, whoa, like I have no boundaries set, or like, I have to work on protecting myself and like conserving my own energy?
I think like you said, when we were younger, it's just how the culture is, where there's very little privacy, very little just control over everything because of, I'm not sure if it's because our parents wanted to protect us. I'm not sure if it's our parents were just very controlling. They wanted, power or something like that, right? But I think I've noticed quite early, I would say, in, let's say, high school, where I think that, hey, our parents are actually kind of causing issues with how I do things, and how and that actually affects how I do stuff in school, activities, extracurricular stuff, right? Because if you don't set your own boundaries, and you're constantly, like you said, spreading yourself too thin and helping everyone, trying to accommodate to everyone, you fail to get your own stuff done, right? Like you said that you were behind on your work, but you'd still put down everything you're doing to go help someone.
Yeah.
Right? I think I did basically the same thing. So I think at school it was a little bit different, right? Compared to home. In the sense that there wasn't, for me, I think at school you said that you would help people do their homework, help teachers or whatever, just to, help and be a good person and just offer what you can. But for me, I wasn't exactly the person who did that. Like, I don't offer my help. I don't do any of that unless they ask. So if people ask me to help them, I would help them. I would, put down my stuff to go help. But I wasn't exactly the person that people went to for help. Because one, I don't really do my work. I don't really pay attention to teachers. I don't really suck up to teachers either, because I kind of just go there to do my own thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, bad thing, whatever, but that's just kind of how I did my stuff. And when I went to, I think the main thing was just at home and making my decisions. And I think just talking or making big decisions, which involved communication with teachers and stuff like that, where I would, if I was home, my parents would tell me what to do. If they needed something, they'll tell me to go do it right away. If they wanted us to do something, you also touched up on this, they'll want you to put down everything to go. I think practicing instruments, studying, reading, doing homework, eating, any of that, they would just tell us, hey, put down everything you're doing and go do this.
Yeah, like they schedule for you.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's not that good. But I think the main thing that really made it hard for me, and it ruined a few relationships, and I would say the most important part that I think, which is like communication. It's really interesting how people think about things and analyze things. So what you say really impacts them, right? So one thing that our parents kind of butted in to my situation was communicating with teachers, professors, friends, right? Like, as adults, you kind of look up to them for advice. You look up to them for protection, advice, knowledge, just everything, right? So as a younger kid, teenager, you don't really know anything. You would want to go to them for help, right? If you have any conflicts with your friends, you want to know, hey, how could I solve this? So you go to your parents, like, ask them, is there a more mature, better, efficient way of solving these, right? Thing is, they aren't that good at solving things, especially if it relates to communication.
Yeah. They're not all knowing, right?
Yeah. Right? So that's how I found out that this is actually a bigger issue if you don't set your boundaries, where they want to help you with everything and they will do it for you. So my relationships where I had to communicate ideas or communicate issues or just explaining different situations with people were all controlled by our parents, right? Whether it's a teacher or a friend, I'd ask them for advice, but they'd tell me word by word what to say. And at the time, I didn't know how to set boundaries, so I kind of just took in what they said. And when I tell people that or I use what they say, it always ends up backfiring, right? Which turns into a negative thing. And I think for you, you said low energy, so that makes you neglect doing your work. You can't function well because you're tired, but you still try to put yourself to allow yourself to help other people. And that always has consequences. And in your case, tiredness, lack of...
Also not being able to, like, help them in a way where it's positive. Like, if you do that, you spread yourself too thin, right? And it doesn't work, right? And then for you also, it's like, when you aren't able to express yourself the way you want to, like, within your relationships, then what are those relationships to you, right?
It gets worse and worse. You don't have closer friends, and you could create issues that shouldn't be there, which could have been resolved so easily, but it just got pulled on, right? So I guess with that said, with all the examples that we brought out, what was a couple things that you learned throughout your years in college? Because you said you noticed more about setting boundaries, learning more about it too in college. What are some things that you found very important? Like, what are some things that you need to set boundaries for, and how should you do it? Because setting boundaries is very hard. Not a lot of people know that, like, they don't think it's easy, right? Because they don't want to tell their parents no, they don't want to tell their friends no.
Well, I feel like the first thing, obviously, like you said, is, like, knowing when to say no. And even before that, right, the whole consensus of, like, how do you know what to say no to is, like, being aware of, like, what you don't want to do. Right? And it's not like, oh, like, if you're uncomfortable with something, like, you're not pushing yourself to do stuff. That's very different. But it's just like, what are your limits? Like, what are the limits of what you can do, right? And knowing that those limits are not, like, push yourself to the max. It's like, those limits are within the boundary of you already set out time for yourself. Then what does that time leave you with? And what does that time leave you with in terms of energy, in terms of, like, presence, in terms of actually physically being, like, next to people, or, like, how much time you have to do the tasks that they ask you to do. So one would be being aware, being knowledgeable, and just self-aware, like you, or, like, knowing, like, what you wanted with your relationships, right? Or me knowing, like, what I wanted to do with my time. And then second thing is just, like, saying no, and, like, being able to explain to yourself, like, this is why I'm saying no. Like, you don't need to justify to anybody, you know. It's like, I don't have the capacity to do it. Solid. That's all you need sometimes, right? And then after that, it's just, like, being in relationships that allow you to be open and value, like, your presence and your energy, right?
Definitely,
so, like,
definitely.
Those are the top 3 things, and I want to see, like, what you think about them, or if there's anything else that you wanted to add in terms of, like, tips, or, like, what you've learned from just, like, going to college and, like, being so self-aware during high school.
So I think I do agree being self-aware is very important. It's also very, very difficult to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Whether it could be because you think there's no problem, right? You don't see a problem in it, which is fine. Fine, because that could be because of so many other issues or other reasons to why you don't see there's an issue. It could be because you don't understand, you don't know, you don't have the knowledge for it, which is also definitely fine, right? Self-awareness takes a long, long time to slowly get used to it, learn more, because that's extra thinking on top of everything else you're doing, right? So I think being self-aware, even though it's hard, it is very important. I would say that's probably the top of my list, because that kind of correlates with everything else that we're saying too, right? And you also said saying yes or no, right? I want to emphasize that saying no doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Saying yes doesn't mean it's a good thing. If you don't want to go drinking and going partying, right? Saying yes isn't gonna help. You're gonna go there, you're gonna waste some time, right? Because you don't want to be there. And you might not enjoy it, and you might not enjoy the company that you're with afterwards.
Yeah.
Because if it's not a fun time and you go there every time, you're going to get upset. You're going to feel it's going to be tiring. And I'm not saying every single time someone wants to, like, let's say you have a group of friends who wants to go drink and party, right? I'm not saying don't ever go, because that's also, to me, kind of, I can't say I would say, I think of it as childish, as like there's no compromises, right? Because if they say let's go drinking every single week, you don't have to say yes to all of them, right? But of course, say yes to some of them, because if you value the relationship, you still try to want to go with them. But
it's that like cost benefit analysis, right? Because then if you are just not the drinking type of person, and if that's like the boundary that you need to set, I think that's totally fine to say no. But I think at that point, if that affects like your relationship, either A, you need to figure out some like friends who have like more similar interests to you, or B, like you need to see if like those friends value your boundaries and what you need to do so that like you can maintain that relationship if that relationship is important to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess a better example would be like, let's say you go to eat, right? You in our group of friends, we have very different things that we like, right? Some like most of our friends aren't all Chinese, aren't all Asian, right?
Yeah.
But if we said let's go to a Chinese place, and our friends are like, if they don't like it, they would still go along with it, right?
Yeah.
Like if everyone said yes and then one person said no, that is fine. But then that's kind of, everyone voted for one thing, right? So that would be a time where saying no is kind of, I feel like it's kind of weird. Like you kind of still compromise whatever. Like going clubbing, drinking, that stuff. I think that's a little bit different because it's still more out of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
But if you're...
Preferences.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of like that. And I think third, right, so yes or no. And then I think third, you said let's say communicating, no?
Yeah, open and like timely communication, whether it be in your personal relationships or your professional relationships.
Yeah, so I think communicating is also a very, very important thing, but it's still super, super hard because that means you have to be able to say that you're wrong or say that you want to change. Like you have to want to change. You have to want to do something about the issue if you want to accomplish something, right? But when I say want to change, that doesn't mean if other people want you to change to help them or like to benefit them, then it's different, right? Everything is connected. So you have to be aware of issues that you have and you have to be able to want to change that, and then also communicate what you want, right? So I think that's why setting boundaries is very important, because if you know what you want and you communicate to them, hey, this is what's up, I don't want to do this, or this is what I'm doing right now, so I'm not going to help you, that is actually better than saying yes or saying no, but with no explanation, right? If it's super important thing, such as, can you help, like my car broke down, can you drive me to a place? But if you're at work and you literally can't go out, or like if something's up that you really can't go, you should probably explain, hey, I'm doing this, I cannot help you, right? But if you just say no and you just leave it at that, that's kind of, to me, that's kind of rude, disrespectful, especially if it's like your friend, family, or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like, communication is a skill that people, like, build on, right? That they slowly learn, like, what's their way of expressing themselves and their needs and how they respond and communicate with, like, the people around them, right? Like, it's something that, like, we continue to learn and, like, not perfect, but just, like, master.
Yeah.
Right? So, I agree. Like, I feel like there are times where, like, there's a direct no that is needed. And there are other times where, you might want to explain something just so that they know that you still care, because you want them to know that you still value their relationships. It's just that you don't have that time right now. You don't have the capacity to do things because you also have your own life, right?
Yeah.
So I agree. I think communication, like, is it's that like old like phrase like just like, communication is key, you know.
Yeah.
It's like one of those key things that helps you to maintain the relationships that you have, and also maintain like a healthy relationship with yourself, right? So yeah,
that is true. Yeah. So is there anything else you want to add? I think we got most of the stuff.
yes,
Right, like the three top, like most important, just to recap, is communication, being self-aware, and just knowing when to say no and when to say yes.
Yeah.
Right, don't spread yourself too thin. Be aware and communicate everything. Right, slowly try to learn to communicate. It's gonna be hard, but in the end, it's actually really good. If you really want good relationships, you really want to succeed in life, because if you can't communicate your thoughts and you're also very self-aware of what you want and what you need, then you wouldn't have to deal with so much time wasted.
Yeah. I think these are the two things that I want to add.
Okay.
Like the general theme on like why this is important, why you should be self-aware, why you should say no at times, and why you should communicate is like to value yourself. It's a lot of making sure that you value your time, your energy, and yourself, and you're not giving it all away, or like letting people step over you because you don't deserve that. Like, you should value yourself. And this goes in your personal relationships, whether like friends are expecting a lot of you that you can't give. Like, you should learn to be able to see when there are unhealthy habits that you have, so that you can have a more fulfilling relationship. And also in work, like, we're not meant to slave away in the corporate world, like, we're not, like, you're not meant to do things just because you feel like you have to. And sometimes we are put in those like positions because we have no choice, and like that sucks, and sometimes we do have to deal with that. But I hope that everyone finds themselves in the future in a situation where you are valued by wherever you work at, and that you can bring up what your time and what you value so that you have a healthy lifestyle. I think that's the whole goal that we've been like, I don't know, just like seeing and like learning, is that to be successful, as in to enjoy your life and be happy with where you are, it's important to value yourself and show others that they should respond in the same way, like they shouldn't treat you in any poor fashion or treatment. Yeah, that made no sense, but just they shouldn't be treating you poorly. And part of like knowing this is that like sometimes we're gonna have to self-advocate. Not everyone is gonna come to our support and be like, this person's not treating you right, like you should blah blah blah. Like, not everyone's gonna like be doing that all the time and be near you all the time. So we have to learn how to do that on our own, and acknowledge the things that go around us, and call out like when things aren't fair and you aren't being treated fairly. So yeah, that's my 2 cents of just like working and going to school and all of that stuff. But yeah, any wise last words?
No, I think I said all of mine. Yeah. So yeah, hope you all enjoy. Hope you all learn something.
Yes, we're all still so young.
Yeah.
But hopefully this helps.
There's always place to improve and grow. So good luck to everyone. Hope you all could start setting better boundaries.
Yeah. Healthy relationships.